Hey guys, this video is going to be sort of a different than all my other tutorials. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over in this video sketches and all the tools within the sketch, so everything here. So the idea is that rather than making a video where I show how to make a specific type of feature, I'm going to show how to use a specific tool. And I might still do some of those feature-centric things explaining how to combine these tools. But what I'm planning to do here for the format of this video is kind of introduce everything and then give some examples of ways to use it. So to start with, to make a sketch, you're going to want to go on one of your planes. So you've got your right plane here, rotated weird. So right plane, top plane, front plane. So that's going to divide your workspace into like 8 kind of, I'd say quadrants, but that's not really what they are because quad implies 4. But it separates your plane, or your workspace into 8 corners. So when I do my tanks, I usually work in the kind of front, like I work on in this kind of quadrant right here. Again, it's not a quadrant, I'm just silly. So what you do for sketch is you click on the plane you want to work with, so whichever of these, or if you want to work with a separate plane, you can go to reference plane. So I'm just going to do a plane that's kind of 45 degrees off of 2 existing planes, just to do something interesting. So you can create these kind of extra planes. Generally you want to start with one of the primary 3, but I'm going to start with this one just to kind of show working on some different plane. So then you're going to go, so you click on your plane, and it's going to pop up with this little button. You can click sketch here, or you can right click on your plane here and click sketch. And it's going to rotate your camera to look directly at the plane. So that's sort of how you get into a sketch. This is probably pretty self-explanatory to a lot of people, but if you've never played with SolidWorks before, that's how you do that. And then what you're going to want to do once you're in a sketch is you have these tools. These are your shape tools. So like for instance, you can create a triangle with lines. So that's just the standard line. You also have a midpoint line where instead of clicking between 2 points that you want to draw between, you click one point and then it draws a line that's equal in distance between that middle point and the 2 boundary points where you place one and then you have the second point down here and it goes back to the standard line. And the third type of line is a center line, which is kind of construction geometry. So I use these a lot for alignment. So these are drawn in the same way as a regular line, with the exception that, say I were to extrude, I'm going to get rid of this, but just extrude the triangle, and I'll draw a center line triangle as well. So the center line triangle, which you can use as reference geometry and stuff when you extrude, it's not there. It's not a thing that you can extrude, so you can use it to draw dimensions and stuff like that, which I'll show in a second, which are different from the geometry you actually want to work with. So for instance, I go back to editing the sketch. I'm just going to select and delete these. Say I want to have this and I want this to go up like an inch off of the origin. What I can do is I can use a smart dimension and click right here and go an inch, but that sometimes kind of clutters things. So what I could also do is I could use a center line, set my constraints, which I'll also go over in a second, and then I can use the smart dimension to make this an inch if I wanted to take that route. And I'll go into the smart dimension now. So what that essentially does is it lets you draw dimensions. So if you select 2 points and go down, it's the horizontal distance between them. To the right is vertical, and kind of if you can do a diagonal too, which is just the magnitude of the length of that line. And so you can do that for straight lines, or you can do radii, or I guess diameters in this case, for circular or arcs. And finally, you can do angles between things. So like 150 degrees will correct that. So you can set all these constraints however you like. Best practice is to have everything fully constrained by dimensions and constraints. So what a constraint does, for instance, is I'm going to get rid of this angle real quick just by selecting it and hitting delete. What a constraint would do is, say I click on this line, I can make it vertical, which is going to break because it doesn't like this, but now I can do it. Supposedly, allegedly. No, because this one's vertical, so that would make it one line, and it doesn't like that. But fix that. I can make this vertical. I can get rid of the vertical constraint and make it horizontal. Or, for a line, I can just fix the line. So it's static. It turns black, and you can't move it. Like, I can move these, and that line stays constant. Although I think I can move this, but this won't move. And finally, if I have 2 lines, I can reference them to each other. So these 2 lines, right now. I can make them horizontal again, vertical. Now I can make them collinear, so the line, it's basically the same line, but you can use that. A better case of that, rather than having them overlapping, it would be if, say, I had, whoops, a line right here and another line right here. So I want a gap between the lines, but I want them to be collinear. So I can do that. So now there's that gap, but other than that, the lines are along one another. Another constraint type that I can go over is the perpendicular constraint. So it makes them perpendicular, 90-degree angle between them. Or I can do parallel, which looks similar to the collinear, except for I can move it around, and they stay parallel, but they don't have to be along one another. And then you can also make them equal length, which is useful for symmetry and things like that. So those are kind of the standard constraints. The other constraint type would be something like, I've got this, and I use this a lot in tracks and stuff, but I've got this line going to the circle. So I can select these. I can have them have the same arc length. So that's similar to the equal sign, except for in this case, it's using the perimeter of the circle, setting that equal to the length of that line. And the other one is tangent. And tangency just does that. It makes the line tangent to the arc. And you can make arcs tangent to each other too at a point. But you can notice that there's nothing to say it comes out perpendicularly from the arc. But what you can do is you can draw a center line, so a construction geometry from the center of the arc to the arc. And then if I do that and draw a line, I can make this collinear with this arc. And that's how you make it like perpendicular to the curve. So that's kind of how you do constraints and stuff. For everything, those are pretty generic. You can slots have a little bit of functionality in them that makes them a little interesting. I'll cover that after I cover everything else. So circles, you just pick a center point and you can draw the radius, or you can do a perimeter where you select 3 points and it will inscribe a circle within those 3 points so that it's coincident with all 3 of them, since 3 points will completely define a circle. And you've got splines, which are a little beyond me. Like, I haven't really looked too much into how they work. I just know they create curves that are tangent at all the interface points and kind of smoothly transition between them. You can use the tangencies and all that with splines. I don't use splines particularly often. And then you can grab the nodes and you can change kind of how, like, the slope at the node. And you can also change the like how flat the node is to set up the geometries how you want. So you can make these kind of amorphous shapes that are quite interesting with splines. So what you can do is you have either explicit, so that's like a y equals x, like some function of x. So you set like the bounds, so like x equals 0 and 1, and then I'm just going to do equals x, and that's going to be a linear curve with a slope of 1. If I do 2x, like this is just some kind of, I guess, basic calculus stuff, it's a slope of 2. Or I can do like a parabola, so x squared. So you can kind of create these function-driven curves. I don't use these particularly often in the context of my models. I use it sometimes for actual engineering work when I need specific profiles. Like I optimize something for a specific profile or something like that, then I can type in the profile, and that's all well and good. The alternative to that is parametric curves, and that's where you have a third axis. So you're like x as a function of time, or it doesn't have to be time. X is a function of some parameter variable t, and y is a function of t. So if I have y equals 0 and x is any number, like say it's just t, it's just going to extend to 1. If y is just t, it's going to be 45-degree angle kind of thing. Conversely, if x is 0 and y is t, it's going to be vertical, and it's going to have a length of 1. But what you can also do is you can do these things where like x is, I don't know, t squared and y is t, and you're going to get like a square root looking thing, or a parabola if you were to rotate it like this. So it's just parametric functions. That's stuff that's covered in early calculus courses and things like that. So I won't go into too much detail, but that can be helpful the same way functions are. Another thing is just the rectangle, so you can use the center rectangle, draw a middle point, and then go out. This isn't the default one, I don't believe. It's just the one I use the most, because say I have like a hatch or something, I can just do this and make it equidistant on both sides of the top edge. Oh, moving them around the plane, not what I wanted to do. So there's a bunch of types of rectangles. There's the corner rectangle, which is going to be parallel to the X and Y axes and different edges. So you just select the one point and then a second point, and it draws a rectangle between them. Pretty straightforward. Second type, center rectangle, I just did. A three-point rectangle lets you do rectangles that are not parallel to axes. So say I want the rectangle to be at a like 45-ish degree angle off the x-axis. I can do that, and I can draw with 3 points, and then it will determine the fourth point to draw a rectangle according to those constraints. You have the center 3 point. So say I want it to be centered on the origin. I want it to go like have an edge parallel to this line here, and then I can set the width. So you can do that. I don't really use that one. And then the final one is a parallelogram, which isn't going to be a rectangle, but you can draw 3 and then do these kind of rhombus shape things going on, which is kind of cool. But I've never used that in practice. So yeah. And then that's the rectangle options. You've got arcs. So the standard one's center point, where you draw a center. So you're kind of drawing a circle, but instead of doing the full circumference, you just set a specific amount of circumference that you want to do. So say I'll just do a 90 degree, like so. Rather than having to make a circle and cut it, you can do it in one operation. You can also do a tangent arc. So to use that, I have to have like a line or something. And what it will do is it will automatically enforce tangency with your starting point. And I can make an infinitely large circle if I do that, but I don't want to. But you can have that tangency and then draw it to another point. And you can do kind of systems of curves that are all tangent to one another. But they won't be tangent at the exit points. So you'd have to do some fancy stuff. And if I wanted that to be tangent, I'd have to select the two and enforce tangency. So you can do that. And the third kind is a 3-point arc, which is similar to the 3-point circle, except for, again, it doesn't go all the way around, similar to the angle one, the first one. So I select 2 points, and I can just kind of select the radius off of that. So that would be useful for, say, I had these 2 lines, and I wanted to draw something between them. I can draw it, and then I can customize what that looks like here. So I could do something like this and get some interesting curve. Again, I don't want to move that. So that's how you do curves. Ellipses and parabolas and stuff are included here. So the ellipse, the standard ellipse, center point, focal point, or I guess edge, and then you draw the like width. So you can do something like that. Pretty straightforward. Partial ellipse, same thing. Draw this, but then instead of so you draw an ellipse, and then you can draw like how far around the ellipse you want to go. So I could do like almost a full ellipse kind of thing. You've got a straight slot, so you select 1 point, 2 points, and then the radius of the slot. Pretty straightforward. And you can say I had 2 slots. I can control A. I can fix them like normal, or I can make them equal so they have the same dimensions, the same width, same length. Kind of useful. In fact, very useful for hatches and stuff like that, like the handles on hatches and stuff to make them consistent. Center point slot, I use these for tank treads. So you can imagine if I have a circle for like the sprocket, like a template for a sprocket, what I can do is rather than trying to get it to line up in the middle, I can just use the center point, click there, go vertical, and I can kind of draw this, and then I can do that kind of thing to get tracks lined up with each other. So that's pretty handy. You've got 3-point arc, so you draw basically an arc. So this is the same as that 3-point circle, or angle, or curve. But then it adds the slot thickness. So you can do things like that, which are pretty interesting. Not too useful for what I do, but still might be useful for what you do. And the final point kind is similar, but you draw a arc differently, essentially. So you just draw the arc like so, and then you can add the slot. Final kind, or not the final, but the final kind of shape you can do is a polygon. So I usually use hexagons because that's kind of a standard for hex head screws and bolts and things like that. So I use those as little features on my tanks. So you just draw a hexagon, but you can also take it and you can do like an 8-sided, so an octagon, so stop sign, if you want to call it that. You can set the origin and some of the dimensions here, the angles and all that, if you wanted to. What you can also do, so I'm going to get rid of that. Oops, I'm going to get rid of this. You can do an inscribed circle, so there are the circles on the inside of the each edge, or you can do a circumscribed circle where the circle is on the vertices. Minor differences might help with dimensioning things. Yeah. And then the last thing is you've got a fillet and a chamfer, which are identical to like the features. So say I have some curve, something like this, some triangle, I can round off the corner by either clicking two edges or just the vertice, and then I can set the radius of the fillet. And a chamfer is the same as another chamfer. You select the two edges, and it draws it by cutting off some distance. So if I want to cut off like 0.1 inches from distance, I can do that, and it cuts off 0.1 on either side to kind of close off the vertex into two vertices with an angle between them. Or I can do angle distance, which would look like, I usually use fillets, but or not, yeah, fillets, not the chamfers, because chamfers are easy enough to do otherwise. But angle fillet, take this, and it's going to do a 45-degree angle with that, like between the perpendicular edge with some length. Or if I wanted to change that dimension to, let's say, 30 degrees, so I'll do angle distance, I'll do a 30 and a 0.1. You can do that. So now it's got 30 degrees off that first axis, and that first axis has a distance of 0.1 to the point where it was originally. So kind of useful. Again, if I want to draw a chamfer, I'm generally just going to go like so and then trim it. But you can do it with those tools if you like. I'm going to delete those. Now you can write text. So the way you write text is you take a center line, or it doesn't have to be a center line, but I tend to use center lines. And then you put your text on, so you can write like hello, whatever you want. You can bold it with this button by selecting it first. Or you can italicize it. You can rotate it, like have it rotate 30 degrees. You can set the, like where on your line it kind of centers at, so left, center, middle, right, or you can average it so it kind of covers the full length. You can have it on either end of the line, and you can have it going in either direction. So that's kind of useful for if you want to inscribe text in something. And then to alter the size, right now I can't do anything, but because it's using the standard font of my SolidWorks file, but if I click this, I can change the width of the letters. And if I were not using this, so if I'm using this, I can change the spacing between them. And if you want to change their size, you go to font, you click that font button, you can change their font style, and you can set it to say like 1/2 inch tall. And it's not going to go beyond this line. It's going to limit to this construction geometry, so the LLO is cut off. But I can do that, or I can do point font if I so chose. So that's how you use the text tool. If I delete this, exit out of that, it's gone. Then there's these trim tools and things like that, so I'll show that. So say I accidentally draw an extra line that I don't want. What do? I take this trim tool. There's a few settings. You can extend it. I've never done that, but I would guess that, yeah, you can just extend it to another line. That's all well and good. For trim, there's several types of trim. I'm only going to talk about power trim because I find it the most useful, and it's really the only one I've used in the past couple of years. But it gives you this kind of buzz saw, and you just go and you take say I want to get rid of this line here, I just drive through it, and it's gone. Want to get rid of this line, drive through it, it's gone, and I can just do that for all the lines, and they're all gone. So you can do that to kind of just remove geometry that's excess. Convert entities is useful. Say I have some shape, so I'm going to create like some solid shape, and I want to replicate it. So say I want to go here and I want to, rather than drawing a circle that's the same, I just click on this face, and I can just convert, and it creates that circle. That's the cross section of the outside of some shape. So for instance, if this was a more complicated shape, so I'm going to just cut a hole in it. So you'd think that when I go to sketch on this, when I hit convert, it would just create this geometry. But what it's actually going to do is it's just going to create this outer perimeter. So convert, it fills in that hole. If you didn't want to fill in that hole, you'd have to click on that and hit convert. Or I guess there's silhouette. I've never used those, but let's just see what they do. So if I do silhouette entities, so I'm going to click, I'm going to get off trim. I'm going to click on this, and if I do silhouette, Let's see if that, yeah, it does basically the same thing, although I guess it would be something like if you had some background thing, it would give you the silhouette. So let's do that. So I'm going to go take a sketch at another angle, and then I'm going to go to silhouette, and I'm going to select this object, and there we go. It generates a silhouette from that perspective. And whoops, wrong button. Sketch. Last one, intersection curve. I haven't used that, so I'm not going to speak to that. But the other ones are going to be something like offset entities, which is really useful. So it's similar to convert entities, but instead of it converts them, but then it adds some distance between them. So you can set that distance to whatever you like, which is useful for like a lip on something, like a complex geometry if you want to put a lip on it. You can reverse it to have it go internally. And the other thing you can do is have it so it extends in both directions, which can be kind of useful. You can set it to make that, this is kind of more relevant in another case that I'll cover in a second, but you can make it construction geometry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a sketch within my sketch here, and then I'm going to do offset. So what I can do is I can extend off of it, and here it's set to make the base geometry construction. I can get rid of that so it makes that solid, and it makes the offset construction. I can select the chain, which is just going to select the full loop. So what that would look like is, say I had a triangle and I want to offset. So I just select this edge and I want to offset. So here it's selecting chain, so it's doing the full loop. If I get rid of that, it just does that one edge. I'm pointing at my screen, but that's useless. But kind of cool. You can do the bidirectional again. And the other thing you can do is, I have it already selected, but you can cap. So you can have it with no cap. It's just another line. If you do caps, you have two options. You have the line option, which just draws a straight line between the vertices. And you have the arc option, which draws a line that's tangent to each edge. So it's another way to make a slot if you wanted to make a slot like that, I guess. And so that's kind of those options. The other options are more useful, in my opinion. Well, offset's pretty useful, but what I can do, I'm going to get rid of this because it's annoying me. But what I can do is I can sketch on this plane, and say I have a really fancy geometry that I like and I want it to be somewhere else. Like, what I can do is I can move it, so I can click on the geometry, and then I click a start point, and then I can just move it around. So I can do that. I can copy, so I can select the geometry, select a start point, and I can move it to another point without getting rid of the original. I can rotate it, so I take it, center of rotation, and then I can set an angle, and I can just rotate it around that angle, around that point of rotation, and I might be able to drag it too. Yeah, so you can drag it. It looks like it's pretty discretized though, but you can do that. You can scale it, so you can click it, scale about, say, this point, and then select a factor, and it's just going to scale it around along that factor. And finally, you've got stretch, which is similar to scale, but I would guess it's more of a skew thing. Let's see. No, I did something wrong. Stretch. Yeah, there we go. So I guess you choose. I don't know what I'm doing with this, so I'm going to cut that. Okay. So I have to select the entire geometry. All right, so for stretch, you select your geometry, and then you can take a point, and that's not working, but you can set an X and Y, and you can, I guess, position it. That doesn't seem useful. I'm going to skip that one. All right, so you've got the move, copy, all those. You can also do is say I have another complex geometry, like that, and I want it to be on both sides of some line. So I can draw a line, and then I can just hit mirror. I can click on the entity I want to mirror, and I can click to mirror it about. So now I can make two of them that are mirrored from one another. Or say I was drawing a schematic, like tracing a schematic, and I realized I had my schematic flipped. What I could do is I could click on this, mirror it, and instead of copying, I could not copy, hit mirror, and then mirror about that axis, and it moves it. It doesn't make a duplicate and put it there. It removes the first and puts it over there. And then there's linear patterns, which are really useful. So you select an axis, select what you want to pattern, and then you can just set the distance that you're moving it. in that particular direction, you can set how many there are, and you can also do it in the perpendicular direction. Or it doesn't have to be perpendicular, it's better if it is, but you can set it in another direction and create like a pattern of them, an array of them. So that's kind of cool. And then you have circular, where you select a point, entities to pattern. That looks suspicious, but then you can just set how many times it patterns around that point. So you can do some cool stuff like that. And that's the basic tools. So yeah, thanks for watching. I think next video I'm going to take the knowledge of how to make these sketches, and I'm going to start showing some capabilities of the extrude, revolved, and the cuts. I'm not going to go too in depth on the sweeps and stuff for a while, but yeah, thanks for watching.